Hey, what's good people? I am back for another episode of the Family Bloodline Podcast. And today I'm going to continue, uh, I'll be continuing reading from um, the Project 2025 documents. And I'm going to pick up where I left off. And just as a quick recap, I left off right at where it began to talk about rebuilding the army, and I've read a lot of the opening already. I traversed through multiple different segments, going back and looking, but I've traversed through multiple different segments, some of which I absolutely do not agree with. Um, and as I read through them, I paused in place to make my comments. If by chance you would like to give your opinions on the things that I have been reading as well, by all means, I invite you on to my StreamYard, and that way you can come up live on multiple different panels at once. Hey, Maya, but you'd be able to come up on multiple different platforms at once, and we can hear your side of things. Tell us whether or not you agree with what is being said and what is being read. And I am making no edits as I read through this actual document. Um, it's been so far, the reading has been eye opening to say the least, to say the very least. As there's been a lot of things that have been, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for liking the hat. Um, but there have been a lot of things that the document plans to um, or seek to overturn in the event this portion of the conservative branch takes control. So this is not me making anything up. It's not me um, giving a paraphrase over what the document says. This is me reading directly from the document as it is written, with no edits, no changes. The only thing that I do is add a little input, my personal opinion, as it were. So we'll have a guest that hops on and joins us. Probably, the time is in about 27 minutes. He said he's read through the document already, but it never hurts to hear some things again, because oftentimes you get more out of the second time than what you do the initial portion of it. So the initial reading or listening or hearing of it. So without further ado, I will continue reading from the Project 2025 document. And again, these are I'm going through the proposed changes for the United States Army. I've read previous portions of it already, and you can go back and I'll post my prior recordings on Spotify. Well, I actually posted the first part on Spotify already, so I'll continue to do that. So if you want to hop on, you can hop on YouTube and give your opinion, and let us know what you think. So here I go. I'm going to share this on my StreamYard page. If you want to hop on over to YouTube, you'll be able to see exactly what I am reading, and you'll be able to see that I'm not changing anything that's being said. All right. So I just pulled it back up on StreamYard. Again, I've posted the link to the StreamYard, as well as if you want to follow on YouTube, check me out under the Family Bloodline 5823, or simply search the Family Bloodline Podcast. All right. So here we go. Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, Project 2025. The U.S. Army's mission is to deploy, fight, and win our nation's wars by providing ready, prompt, and sustained land dominance by army forces across the full spectrum of conflict as part of the joint force. Today, however, the Army cannot execute its land dominance mission. The U.S. Army is at an inflection point that is marked by more than a decade of steadily eroding budgets and diluted buying power. An unappreciable degradation in readiness and training capacity, a near crisis in the recruiting and retention of critical personnel, and a bevy of aging weapon systems that no longer provide a qualitative edge over peer and near peer competitors, but will not be replaced in the near term, which is absolutely not true. I know of multiple different weapon systems that are being what's called fielded to the force. So that is there are some things in that are true, but there are others that are absolutely not true. All right, continuing. All of these challenges are set against the backdrop of a complex and dynamic global geopolitical environment that is exemplified and exacerbated by the triumph of our adversaries in Afghanistan over a 20-year struggle there, as well as recent Russian outrages in the Ukraine and China's, wow, that's a big word, bellicosity, both on its borders and in surrounding disputed regions. In spite of the ever increasing operational pools, our Army is consistently being asked to do more with fewer resources. The status quo is further marked by pervasive politically driven top down focus on progressive social policies that emphasize matters like so called diversity, equity, and inclusion and climate change, often to the detriment of the Army's core warfighting mission. So, just to put a few things in context, the Army, I can't remember exactly how many years ago, but the Army changed the way it looked at promotion and viewed different promotion packets. And what that change involved was, oh, give me a second, let me get to these comments. Mira, papi, ¿qué pasó? I see what you just put there. I know you're being silly. um, But what those changes involved for the Army was taking what were called DA photos off of actual promotion packets. And what that did was it eliminated the need or the want or drive to pick a candidate, uh, honestly, based on racial overtones. The Army at one point had the face of the Army, unfortunately, at one point, minus a few leaders here and there, was heavily populated with white men leaders. And the Army is a much more diverse area than simply white males that dominate a specific military occupational skill, as well as a specific branch in the Army. So once those photos got taken off and the packets were reviewed simply based on merit, there was a huge gap that was closed between the actual promotions that began to occur at all levels, both at the senior levels as well as the junior levels. So the effort to uh, m- for the Army, at least, what I think, there's an effort that is a bit of a misnomer in that last sentence when it says the social policies that emphasize matters like so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion and climate change, often to the detriment of the Army's core warfighting mission, is a false statement. I think the Army has become overall a better organization because of its different actual leaders that have been put in place at this time. Continuing on, needed reforms, rebuild the Army. The total Army budget has decreased by roughly 11% since 2018, perilously affecting the service's readiness and ability to train and to procure new personnel and equipment. Declining budgets and decreased buying power have forced the Army to lower training standards and opportunities to train, propose reductions in strength, slash military construction programs to historically low levels, and scale back essential modernization programs. And so the proposed change is increase the Army budget to remain the world's preeminent land power, accelerate the development and procurement of the six current Army modernization priorities, which are long range precision fires, next generation combat vehicle, future vertical lift, the Army network, air missile defense, and soldier lethality to replace worn out and outdated combat systems and ensure ground combat dominance. Increase funding to improve Army training and operational readiness. Hey, what's going on, cousin? Thanks for hopping on. Increase the Army force structure by 50,000 to handle two major regional contingencies simultaneously, which the Army can do right now, actually, and honestly. Reform recruiting efforts. The Army missed its 2022 recruitment goal by 25% or 15,000 soldiers. Now, just to be clear, that ballpark or that miss in numbers and figures, yes, the Army did fall short, but as a military, we fell short on our numbers. And I have my own reserves as to why and what happened to hit that, which I'll probably circle back around to, which once my battle ends up hopping on, and we can discuss that a little bit more. Continuing on, focus on deployability and sustained operations. The U.S. Army's very lethal ground force capability is irrelevant if it cannot quickly deploy to locations for employment and decisive operations to secure our global security interests. Additionally, Army logisticians provide the ground transportation, retire, retirement for show, transportation of both personnel and equipment, fuel, food, and water, munitions, which are bombs and bullets, medical supplies and services, and veterinary services, food safety that are critical to sustainment of the other services. The proposed shift is to immediately increase the production and stockpile of critical munitions and repair parts, prioritize expeditionary logistics in all force design and operational planning to guarantee entry into a contested theater of war, increase the level of joint forcing training, synchronization, and coordination focused on logistics. Prepare to deploy forces from degraded US based transportation infrastructure that is compromised by opposing forces. Transform Army culture and training. This should be interesting. The Army can no longer serve as the nation's social testing ground. A rebuilt Army that is focused again on its core warfighting mission and empowered it with the tools, resources, and authorities it needs to accomplish that mission must be the next administration's highest defense priority. I'm going to read that paragraph again, and entitled Transform Army Culture and Training. The Army can no longer serve as the nation's social testing ground, which the Army has proved to have been on multiple different occasions. A rebuilt Army that is focused again on its core warfighting mission and empowered it with the tools, resources, and authorities it needs to accomplish that mission must be the next administration's highest defense priority. I'm not sure what they're getting at right here, but I'm pretty sure we are about to find out. The proposed amendments stop using the Army as a test bed for social evolution. Misusing the Army in this way detracts from its core purpose while doing little to reshape the American social structure. The Army no longer reflects national demographics to the degree that it did before 1974 when the draft was eliminated. Now that is, if that's not dog whistling, I'm not sure what is. Again, I just stated that um, because of the changes in the way the Army actually promotes people with by removing photos, there was a gap that was closed in the promoting for senior as well as junior soldiers across Army leadership. And with those changes, it did not make the Army any weaker than what it was. It actually strengthened the Army and its capability of fighting different wars around the globe. So this sounds like it wants to get back again to a predominantly white male led, at least as far as power is concerned, military with very little uh, understanding as to how other different senior leaders, because of their actual experiences and intelligences, right? Let's not forget that we have senior leaders of all demographics that are absolutely geniuses with how they've engaged in different strategical movements across the battlefield. Colin Powell being the first that I'll mention. There have been multiple generals. I served under one who changed the landscape of how we actually do business, and they changed the landscape of how we strategically plan and execute our maneuvers and movements and functions vastly. Changed a lot of Army doctrine, and I was absolutely happy to be a part of that. All right, proposed amendment two. Demand accountability and senior leaders to reverse the decline in public support for military service. I don't think there has been a decline in support for military service, at least as far as the public is concerned. I'm still currently serving. Um, but I've not seen this decline that this is mentioning. I think that's a very fictitious statement. I'm sure that they were not totally happy with General Milley's diction and the way that he actually represented the force, which I believe he did a great job at when he spoke about CRT, when he actually spoke about understanding and reading different literature about different topics as it pertained to the demographics of the Army at whole. And that gave him the understanding as far as a leader about how to properly lead the force. So this statement I directly disagree with. We have to continue to have diversity in leadership because that is what makes us strong on the battlefield. The ability to shift direction at a moment's notice when in combat. Anyway, number three, reestablish the experiential base for the planning, execution, and leadership of Army formations in large scale operations. Currently, there are no general or field grade officers who served as planners or commanders against a near peer adversary in combat. And there shouldn't be. We own the sky, we own the night, so there shouldn't be near peer adversaries. Like that's it. I'm gonna pause in place. I'm gonna take a deep breath and I'm gonna take a few steps back because I am a combat vet and I read between the lines of what they're saying and I disagree. There's the pause. Again, just to remind everybody while I'm pausing in place, if you want to hop onto the panel, by all means, switch over to YouTube at the Family Bloodline 5823 so you can hop on the panel as I read this and give your input as I talk about this. All right. Number four, examine the logic of emerging Army concepts about employing massed long range fires and effects without considering how to gain advantage by closing with and dominating an adversary on land. Recognize that high intent. I'm going back to this. I'm going back to this. And the reason why I'm going back to this, uh, give me a second. I got to read a comment. It depends. LSB had been suffering forever on selections for yeah. So what that's talking about, the comment that I was just reading, as another brother that I served with, and he's talking about different senior leadership that was put in place at a unit we served in, and the demographics that it affected. So, but back to this comment. Recognize the high intensity in combat operations cannot be now examine the logic of emerging Army concepts about employing mass long range fires. I don't understand this want and drive to actually have up close, near fights and battles with an enemy when you can sustain and win battles and wars from long range. If you can continue to do that as an army and save and maintain lives, you are doing the right thing at the end of the day. So I understand the need to always stay ready to engage in close quarter combat. I absolutely do. Again, I am a war vet, but the drive to do this is a bit unhinged, to say the least. Or it's a weird concept. Recognize that high intensity land combat operations cannot be sustained through short term. What's happening? Through short term individual or unit rotations in the style of the sustained low intensity campaigns conducted over the past 20 years. So, actually, the movement of Iraq changed the way we fight wars at this point. There have been a lot of shifts and a lot of doctrine that has been transformed in order to continue to win those different wars and battles. Transform how the National Guard is employed during extended operations short of declared war to preclude back-to-back federal and state deployments of National Guard soldiers. Lessons, bruh. Soldiers in order to stabilize and preserve military volunteerism in our communities. Revamp Army School curricula to concentrate on preparation for large-scale land operations that focus on defeating a peer threat. Address the underlying casual issues driving increasing Army suicide rates, which have surpassed pre-World War II rates and are now eclipsing the rate among civilians. That part, I understand. What should happen with that? Well, if they're going to address it, they should be honest. But I will come back to that at another time. I think it's a. I'll come back to that because that again, that's I'll begin to make passionate assertions as to what they mean by that and how they plan on actually engaging in that battle for our vets military wide to bring down the actual levels of self inflicted wounds. I'd love to hear them actually speak in depth on this issue. So, all right, so that was the Army. Now we're moving forward to the U.S. Navy. As noted at the beginning of this chapter, the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the power to provide and maintain a navy. Inherent in this phrase is a recognition that there is a vital national interest in the maritime environment and that this national interest requires sustained planning and investment. This is as true today as it was almost 250 years ago and will remain true into the future. The U.S. Navy exists for two primary reasons: to project prompt, sustained, and effective combat power globally, both at sea and ashore, and to deter aggression by potential adversaries by maintaining a forward operational presence in conjunction with allies and partners. Today, the People's Republic of China, People's Liberation Army, Navy, uh, for the acronym of PLAN, can challenge the U.S. Navy's ability to accomplish its mission in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. In the production, employment, and control of maritime forces, the USN must consider the scope and rate of technological change and, where appropriate, adapt its processes and workforce development. And balancing the necessary long term industrial model of naval platforms against emerging short term opportunities, the USN must take account for advances that may present vulnerabilities and risks, as well as what is assured and secure. Needed reforms. Invest in and expand force structure. The USN's organizing principle remains platform centered, vessel manned by sailors. The manned surface and subsurface forces act in concert with land based, air based, and yeah, space based forces to project. I'm not used to Space Force yet, y'all. And space based forces to project power outside sovereign territory, principally by operating in international waters. Investments must be closely coordinated with these other elements of military power. Build a fleet of more than 355 ships. Develop and field unmanned systems to augment the manned forces. Require that range and lethality be the key factors in all procurement and sustainment decisions for ships, aircraft, and munitions. Reestablish the General Board. In contrast with the Navy General Board that served ship development so well during the interwar period, the current joint process for defining the requirements for major defense acquisitions is not well suited to long term planning of the sort that is needed for USN fleet architecture and shipbuilding. The interwar General Board should serve as a model, empowered with final decision authority over all requirements, documents concerning ships, and the major defense systems fielded on ships. The individual board members would ensure a broad base of knowledge as well as independent thinking. They don't really want independent thinking. That's what I've been reading so far. Establish a rapid capabilities office. The USN must transition technology into warfighting capability more rapidly. It must foster a culture of innovation that includes connecting theoretical and intangible ideas with real production environments that produce tangible and practical outcomes, and adapting proven processes to advance material solutions. Harness innovation and willingness to tolerate risk so that good enough systems can be fielded rapidly. Use the space agency as a model. That that mm, anyway, I'll continue on and pass over that. Establish an oversight board of directors made up of the service chief, service secretary, and undersecretary of defense for acquisition and sustainment. Accelerate the purchase of key munitions. It takes years to build and maintain navies, but only hours to expand their ordnance in combat. The USN must be prepared to expand large quantities of air launched and sea launched stealthy precision cruise missiles against targets both at sea and shore. Additionally, modern air defense requires the use of high performance surface to air missiles. Produce key munitions at their maximum rate with significant capacity. Working with the Congress, employ the widest possible range of techniques to enhance the munitions supply chains and workforce. Enhance warfighter development. The USN requires a variety of documented qualifications for personnel to advance in their careers and assume leadership positions. It also requires individual professional qualifications that are focused on warfighting. Mandate qualifications that demonstrate an understanding of core competence in collective integrated warfighting, especially based on current plans and technologies. Elevate the headquarters staff focused on warfighting development in 7 within the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations, OPNAV, and empower it to develop such requirements. Require that war games be utilized as exper- mm, experiential learning environments for the participants as a prerequisite for achieving career milestones, department heads, commanding officers, and major commanders. I don't know about that. Highlighting training and leader development that USN forces can and must maintain the ability to operate and from and or defend sovereign territory to include our allies and partners. Train to balance effects from kinetic to non-kinetic and from lethal to non-lethal through effective command and control. U.S. Air Force. The U.S. Air Force today lacks a force structure with the lethality, survivability, and capacity to fight a major conflict with great power. Like China, deter nuclear threats, and meet its other operational requirements under the National Defense Strategy. For 30 years, the Air Force has received less annual funding if pass-through funding, defined as money in the Air Force budget that does not go to the Air Force, is removed from the equation than the Army and Navy have received. This understanding has forced the Air Force to cut its forces and forego modernizing aging weapon systems that were never designed to operate in current threat environments and are structurally and mechanically exhausted. The result is an Air Force that is the oldest, smallest, and least ready in its history. I kind of agree with that. The Air Force has always maintained a smaller posture than the other branches. The decline in Air Force capacity and capability is occurring at the same time the security environment demands the very options that the Air Force uniquely provides. Combatant commanders routinely request more Air Force capabilities than the service has the capacity to provide. The Air Force today simply cannot accomplish all the missions it is required to perform. The Air Force has consistently stated on the official record that it is not sized to meet the mission demands placed on it by the various U.S. combatant commanders. A 2018 study, The Air Force We Need, showed a 24% deficit in Air Force capacity to meet the needs of national defense strategy. Those conclusions remain valid and are more pronounced today because of subsequent aircraft retirements. The demand is also higher because of world events. To understand these trends, one needs only to consider that the Air Force's future 5-year budget plan retires 1,463 aircraft while buying just 467. This makes for a reduction of 996 aircraft by 2027. The net result is a force that is smaller, older, and less ready at a time when demand is uh, burgeoning. I don't know if I agree that the Air Force isn't ready. I know that there is absolutely space to grow and try to maintain, but I don't agree that the Air Force isn't ready. Uh, Needed reforms: increase spending and budget accuracy in line with a threat-based strategy. Returning the U.S. military to a force that can achieve a deterrence or win in a fight if necessary requires returning to a threat-based defense strategy. Real budget growth combined with a more equitable distribution of resources across the armed services is the only realistic way to create a modernized Air Force with the capacity to meet the needs of the national defense strategy. Additionally, as noted above, pass-through funding causes past pass-through funding causes numbers cited in current DoD budget documents to be higher than the dollar amounts actually received by the Air Force. Adopt a two workforce defense strategy with strategy. I'm sorry. Adopt a two workforce defense strategy with scenarios for each service that will allow the Air Force to attain the resources it requires by developing a force sizing construct that reflects what is required to accomplish strategic objectives. Eliminate pass-through funding, which has grown to more than 40 billion per year and has caused the Air Force to be chronically underfunded for decades. I wonder how they're going to do that because I think a lot of that has shifted to the Space Force. Increased Air Force budget by 5% annually after adjusting for inflation. to reverse the decline in size, age, and readiness and facilitate the transition to a more modern, lethal, and survivable force. Reduce near-term and mid-term risks. Increase the Air Force's acquisition to next-generation capabilities that either are or soon will be in production. Will increase the ability of the United States to deter or defeat near-term to mid-term threats. Increase F-35A procurement to 60 to 80 per year. Build the capacity for a B-21 production rate of 15 to 18 aircraft per year, along with applicable elements of the B-21 long-range strike family of systems. Increase Air Force airlift and aerial refueling capacity to support agile combat employment operations that generate combat sorties from a highly dispersed posture in both Europe and the Pacific. Develop and buy larger quantities of advanced mid-range weapons, 50 to 25, that are sized to maximum targets per sortie for stealth aircraft flying in contested environments against target sets that could exceed 100,000 aim points. Accelerate the development and production of Sentinel intercontinental ballistic missiles to reduce the risk of inherent in an aging Minuteman III force in light of China's nuclear modernization breakouts. Increase the number of EC-37B electronic warfare aircraft from 10 to 20 in order to achieve a minimum capacity to engage growing threats from China across the electromagnetic spectrum. What I will also say is that although some of these proposed ideas are a bit far-fetched, we also have to remember that some of the capabilities that they're talking about are actually lodged in various different military branches. So, yeah. Invest in future Air Force programs and efforts. Increasingly capable adversaries require new capabilities to enable victory against those adversaries. Attain an operationally optimized advanced battle management system as the Air Force element of the DoD Joint All-Domain Command and Control Enterprise. Produce the next generation air dominance system of systems, which is air moving target indication, other sensors, communications, command and control, weapons, and uninhabitable aerial vehicles. Achieve moving target engagement capability and capacity against sea, surface, and ground mobile targets at the scale necessary to meet the needs of the National Defense Strategy. I'm looking at other different screens as I read this. Build resilience basing, sustainment, and communications for survivability in a contested environment. Establish a vigorous and sufficiently funded electromagnetic spectrum operations recovery plan to make up for more than 20 years of neglect of this mission area. And here we go with the U.S. Marine Corps. The U.S. Marine Corps, USMC, is the maritime land force of the Department of Defense and Department of the Navy. It serves as a critical role as an expeditionary amphibious force that can project power from sea to shore and beyond while performing other specialized missions like securing America's diplomatic outposts abroad. Between the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 and the conclusion of U.S. military operations in Afghanistan in August of 2022, the Marine Corps engaged in extended operations ashore as directed by the Secretary of Defense, leaving it with little opportunity or ability to train for and execute the naval and amphibious operations for which it is uniquely suited and directed by law. This lengthy divergence from its primary mission led to deep concern that the Corps had become a second land army, prompting senior Marine Corps leaders to push for the service to return to the sea. In addition, the USMC spent nearly 2 decades fighting contingency wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and developed capabilities that were specifically geared to those fights but have limited utility in scenarios involving evenly matched and advanced enemies or amphibious operations that are necessary for the projection of power. As a result, the Marine Corps Commandant General David H. Berger developed and began to implement Force Design 2030, a plan that, if completed, would be the most radical transformation of the Marine Corps since World War II. The successful implementation of this force redesign, coupled with reforms in the Marine Corps' personnel system and the Navy's amphibious shipbuilding plans, will be critical to ensuring the Corps' future combat effectiveness. And we're going to the needed reforms. Divest systems to implement the Force Design 2030 transformation. Divesting equipment that is less relevant to distributed low signature operations in a contested maritime environment will make funds available for modernization. Transfer USMC force structure. Eliminate all USMC law enforcement battalions. What? It's weird. Eliminate all USMC law enforcement battalions. Transform at least one Marine infantry regiment into a Marine uh, littoral regiment. Reduce the size of remaining infantry battalions. Divest systems of equipment that are better suited to heavier U.S. Army units. Maintain divestment of M1 Abram tanks. Eliminate the majority of tube artillery, which are M777 batteries. Reduce the number of advanced amphibious assault vehicles and the number of their replacements. Use funds made available by divestment of systems to support new systems that are geared to the likely needs of future conflicts. Increase the number of rocket artillery batteries with HIMARS. Increase the number of upgraded light armored vehicle companies. Increase the number of unmanned aerial systems and anti-air systems, including counter-UAS systems. Develop long-range strike missiles and anti-ship missiles for the Corps. Modernize USMC infantry equipment. Transform the USMC personnel paradigm. More than other services, the USMC relies heavily on junior non-commissioned officers, which are NCOs, to staff key positions across the force, but especially in combat arms. For example, E4s routinely hold squad leader billets when the Army normally has E6s in those billets. The nature of more distributed operations and the increasingly complex responsibilities of a Marine Corps rifle squad and platoon under Force Design 2030 will only put more responsibility on the back of squad leaders and platoon sergeants, increasing the need for more senior Marines in those critical positions. Additionally, the Corps needs to improve its retention of junior NCOs after their first enlistment. The Marine have much lower rates of re-enlistment than other branches, and there's a reason for that. There is absolutely a reason for that. I'll let the Marines talk about that. Allow the USMC's combat arms rank structure with the U.S. Army squad leader billets for E6s and platoon sergeant billets are for E7s. Align the USMC's combat arms rank structure with the U.S. Army's. I don't agree with that. The Marine Corps is designed to do what it does, and it does it really, really well. The way that it's made up now. I understand why they would want that, but the Marine Corps does what it does, and it does it well. I don't think simply creating extra billets for mid-level to senior level NCO ranks is going to help that. Create better incentives to retain talented junior NCOs, especially in infantry and other critical military occupational specialties. I do agree with that. Those guys don't get bonuses. Reduce unnecessary deployments to increase dwell time in order to enable more robust primary military education. Align Navy amphibious shipbuilding with Force Design 2030. The U.S. Navy has struggled for decades to maintain an amphibious fleet that could support USMC war plans around large-scale amphibious operations. In addition, amphibious shipbuilding has often had to compete against other priorities within a constrained budget and limited shipbuilding capacity. Develop and produce light amphibious warships laws to support more distributed amphibious operations, especially in the Pacific. Maintain between 28 and 31 larger amphibious warships as opposed to the 25 specified in current Navy, shipbuilding plans, and the 38 specified before 2020. Jesus, I got the hiccups. I got them hiccups right now for some reason. U.S. Space Force. I don't know much about the Space Force team. I I just don't know much about these guys, but I guess I'm about to find out. And then I'll have to go do some extra research because I don't know what's false and what's actually accurate on this. So, U.S. Space Force. U.S. Space Forces conduct global space operations to sustain and enhance air, land, and sea effectiveness, lethality, and superiority by providing secure, broadband global communications, which is precision position navigation and timing accuracy, attack warning and threat tracking and targeting capability, which is real time intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance information, And their assured continuity of the operations both by defending U.S. assets and by conducting offensive operations that are capable of imposing unacceptable losses on adversaries that might seek to attack them. The U.S. Space Force, USSF, was established to assure contip- contemptuous global and theater combat support from space, to deter attacks against U.S. space assets, and to prevail in space should deterrence fail. The USSF posture was conceived as a balance of offensive and defensive deterrent capabilities designed for maximum effectiveness. And here we are at the needed reforms as proposed by Project 2025. And of course, it's going to start off with a blame. Reverse the Biden administration's defensive posture. The Biden administration has eliminated all offensive deterrence capabilities and instead will rely solely on defensive capabilities of disaggregation, maneuver, and reconstitution. The most costly, the slowest, and ultimately the most fragile architecture selection. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Here's the reform. Reestablish offensive capabilities to guarantee a favorable balance of forces, efficiently manage the full deterrence spectrum, and seriously complicate enemy calculations of a successful first strike against U.S. space assets. Restore architecture balance in U.S. Space Forces, both offensive and defensive, to restore deterrence dominance efficiently and quickly. Rapidly expand space control capability to include cislunar space, the region beginning at geosynchronous altitude and encompassing the moon, to provide early warning of enemy attack. Seek arms control and rules of the road understandings only when they are unambiguously in the interest of the U.S. and its allies and prohibit their unilateral implementation. Reduce overclassification. The USSF must move beyond the Cold War era culture of secrecy and overclassification that surrounded military space to facilitate greater coordination and synchronization of efforts across the government and commercial sectors. Declassify appropriate information about terrestrial and on orbit space capabilities that threaten the U.S. space constellation, as well as those being pursued by our competitors to secure the principled right to counter them offensively. Implement policies suited to a mature USSF. And again, it's hard for me to understand saying a mature USSF when it's still in its infancy. No longer a newborn, the USSF has entered its fourth year of existence, and the lessons learned can be incorporated across all facets of the force to increase its effectiveness. Restructured from the current unity of effort structure to unity of command. I understand that. Okay. Lead the U.S. government's development of a clear and unambiguous declaratory policy that the United States will operate at will in space and enforce these operations with capabilities that ensure effective deterrence and the ability to impose our will if necessary. In the current study phase of concept development and issue necessary guidance for the development and fielding of offensive capabilities. Alter the Space Development Agency's current fail early approach and transition to a methodology that maintains aggressive timeliness, but with significantly greater engineering rigor, with special attention to sustainment, support, and fully integrated space operations. Increase the number of general officer positions to ensure the Space Force's ability to compete for resources on a common basis with other services. Explore creation of Space Force Academy to attract top aero-astro students, engineers, and scientists and develop astronauts. The academy could be attached initially to a large existing research university like the California Institute of Technology or MIT, share faculty and funding, and eventually be built separately to be on par with other service academies. I don't directly disagree with that. U.S. Cyber Command. U.S. Cyber Command was established in 2010 by the Department of Defense to unify the direction of cyberspace operations, strengthen DoD cyberspace capabilities, and integrate and enhance U.S. cyber expertise. Cyber capabilities and threats are evolving rapidly. That is true. Accordingly, a conservative administration should be especially sensitive to and prepared to meet the challenges presented by bureaucratic silos, inappropriately rigid tactical doctrine, and strategic thinking's historic tendency to lag behind technological capabilities. I'm not sure about that sentence. It sounds as if they're wanting that we have the Hague and Geneva Code for a reason, and it needs to be there. War is an ugly animal, and people take on different persona when they are at war, and the expectation is to commit atrocities. If the expectation is to commit atrocities, well, people will commit atrocities. So, needed reforms. Ensure U.S. Cyber Command is properly focused. Mission creep is leading to wasteful overlap with the Department of Homeland Security, National Security Agency, Department of Defense, and Central Intelligence agencies. Separate U.S. Cybercom from the National Security Agency per congressional direction. Conduct effective offensive cyber effects operations at the tactical and strategic levels. Expand defensive cyber effects operations authorized by President Trump's classified national security presidential memorandum 13, United States Cyber Operations Policy, and U.S. Cybercom's participation in federal efforts to fortify U.S. elections to eliminate the perception that DoD is engaged in partisan politics. I don't know. They're not engaged in politics. I haven't heard of a perception of that being a thing. So, nah. Increase U.S. Cybercom's effectiveness is where I am. Accelerate the integration of cyber and electronic warfare, EW, doctrine and capabilities abiding by the time-tested norms of combined arms warfare. Mandate that development teams will include both coders and soldiers, aircrew and sailors with kinetic experience at the platoon level. Break the paradigm of cyber authorities held at the strategic level. Increase cyber resilience by, for example, protecting the Nuclear Command, Control, and Communications Network and the Air Force's Cyber Resiliency Office for Weapons Systems, the CROWS. Give me 1 second. I'll get back to it. Got to send this out. Trying to focus, but every time I get on here, I get a ton of text messages. Expand coordination of joint operations with allies. Implement the Government Accountability Office's recommendation that the DoD Chief Information Officer, Commander of U.S. Cybercom, and Commander of Joint Force Headquarters, DoD Information Network, align policy and system requirements that enable DoD to have enterprise-wide visibility of cyber incident reporting to support tactical, strategic, and military strategies for response. Rationalize strategy and doctrine. Update the October 2022 National Security Strategy to define DoD roles and responsibilities beyond existing platitudes. Apply traditional deterrent strategies and principles for using cyber, EW, in retaliation for foreign cyber attacks and/or EW actions against U.S. infrastructure and citizens. Special Operations Forces. Man, these guys have they've got they have an opinion about everything, which is odd because we're still winning battles, we're still winning wars. So, and we evolve. The military services evolve quickly as well. All right, Special Operations Forces. Even though America's conventional war in Afghanistan was a failure, Special Operations Forces of the United States Special Operations Command, USACOM, executed an extremely effective counterterrorism campaign. There has not been another major attack on the homeland. Global terrorist threats are reduced and managed. Collaboration with international partners is effective, and units under USACOM are the most capable and experienced warfighters in 2 generations. That is true. There is a movement to reduce the scope and scale of USOCOM's missions in favor of other service priorities and great power competition. This would be a mistake because USOCOM can be employed effectively in great power competition. It makes sense to capitalize on USOCOM's experience and repurpose its mission to include irregular war within the context of great power competition, thereby providing a robust organization that is capable of achieving strategic effects that are critical both to our national defense and to the defense of our allies and partners around the globe. Irregular warfare should be used proactively to prevent state and non state actors from negatively affecting U.S. policies and objectives while simultaneously strengthening our regional partnerships. If we maintain irregular warfare's traditional focus on non state actors, we limit ourselves by addressing only the symptoms, not state actors, and not the problems themselves: China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Uh, Give me 1 second. I don't see him. Give me 1 second, everybody. I'm trying to make sure uh, I'm able to pull a guest in. Uh, Let me try it again to share the link to him directly. So give me 1 second. We'll get back to the reading. All right. Um. All right. It makes sense to capitalize. Oh, okay. I read that part. So I'm going to the needed reforms as again proposed by Project 2025. Needed reforms. Make irregular warfare a cornerstone of security strategy. Think about that. It takes a lot, but okay. The U.S. can project strength through unified action with our interagency allies and partners by utilizing irregular warfare capabilities synchronized with elements of national power. Broadly redefining irregular warfare to address current state and non-state actors is critical to countering irregular threats that range from the Chinese use of economic warfare to Russian disinformation and Islamist terrorism. A broad definition of irregular warfare in the national security strategy would allow for a whole of government approach. Oh, okay. Thereby providing resources and capabilities to counter threats and ultimately serve as credible deterrents at the strategic and tactical levels. Define irregular warfare as a means by which the United States uses all elements of national power to project influence abroad to counter state adversaries, defeat hostile non state actors, deter wider conflict, and maintain peace in great power competition. So they're looking to actually enlarge the special forces community. I don't think that's the greatest of ideas. I really, really don't. Characterize the state and non state irregular threats facing the U.S. by region in the national security strategy. Direct that irregular warfare resources, capabilities, and strategies be incorporated directly into the overall national defense strategy instead of being relegated to a supporting document. Establish an irregular warfare center, an irregular warfare center of excellence to help DoD train, equip, and organize to conduct irregular warfare as a core competency across the spectrum of competition, crisis, and conflict. Counter China's Belt and Road Initiative globally. DoD, in conjunction with the interagency allies and partner nations, must work proactively to counter China's BRI around the globe. He's here, but he ain't connected. He's not connected just yet. I don't know what's going on with my man. Task US SOCOM. And of course, there you are. I'm gonna pull you up. I'm gonna pull you up.
All right.
All right, I got you. I'm reading the reforms proposed by Project 2025
Yeah.
uh, as it pertains to US SOCOM. And so, yeah, I'm not sure. Did you read that part already?
No, I didn't see that part.
Oh man, yeah. There's been a long list of essentially all of the whole of the military service redefining reformation that they are pushing. and wanting, um, which all in all is not a great idea. So the part that I'm reading right now is recommending the expansion of US SOCOM into other areas to make and by purposely expanding uh, definitions. So that definition that they're trying to expand is, let me go back to it. Characterizes state and non-state irregular threats by facing. No, not that one. Oh, it says define irregular warfare as a means by which the United States uses all elements of national power to project influence abroad to counter state adversaries, defeat hostile non-state actors, deter wider conflict, and maintain peace and great power competition. That's what they're wanting to redefine irregular warfare in order to meet that standard. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
I disagree with that.
Okay,
Um,
give me 1 second. Let me do this. I'm a pull us up so we can talk about
yeah.
that. Actually,
Okay.
I'll do it this way.
All right.
Okay. So what's your disagreement with it?
All right. So here's the thing. Special operations, right? Special warfare is it's a limited capacity,
Hmm.
and I think that America is leaning too much on it because it sounds great. We have the movies, Lone Survivor. We have what's the one about Lebanon? And I forgot the 12 Horsemen or something like that. That wasn't Lebanon; it's another movie. But Hollywood has glorified it,
Sure.
and using military action to dictate the actions of another country just creates more enemies. We're not getting at the root issue by
Okay.
always emphasizing the military. I think we're getting away from diplomacy and diplomatic affairs. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I don't think
Yeah.
it's a wise. So what they're saying in this essentially is Mike
Uh,
makes right, and it
yeah.
removes any diplomatic efforts of conflict resolution. And it's
Mhm.
saying you're going to do what we want you to do, and if you don't, well, we're going to consider that irregular warfare, and here come our top hitters.
Right.
So I,
Exactly.
yeah, I think the lift and shift is is overly stated, based off of older tactics and readings, and not having an actual understanding of why the special forces community is so small and needs to be, and how the actual uh, joint forces is supposed to work in consortium with each other when talking about different strategies of engagement on different platforms, right? So let's take, for instance, your specialties, the civil affairs community, um,
Hmm.
which is to win the hearts and minds of the population, and the PSYOP community,
Right.
which is to maximize and exploit different propaganda assets to our advantage over the actual population that where we're at.
Hmm.
That I think that if there was an expansion or an actual capitalization on using civil affairs and the psyop community, I think we'd meet a better end state in multiple different regions. Um, because I think it fare well in today's actual global geopolitical spectrum than what it would simply sending rounds down range, uh, in the form of special operations units, again, to force the might makes right movement.
Hmm.
I don't know if you did any studying or reading about General Petraeus's movement in Iraq.
Superficial, surface level.
Okay, I so when I did MLC, I did my paper
Uh-huh.
over General Petraeus, and it was, we had to break it up and do it in different sections regarding
Uh-huh.
MDMP, right, and all the
Okay.
processes inside of that. And mine was assessment, reassessing. But General Petraeus did a masterful job with actually engaging the civil affairs community in the different regions. He had the civil affairs community meeting with the uh, intelligence community, He had the meeting with the heads of state, the heads of the different
Mhm.
parties. He had the meeting
Mhm.
with the different tribes and areas in order to make sure that that there was a continuation or an actual, even if it wasn't a true picture, at least the thought or the picture of the olive branch being extended, as it were.
Right.
And
Right.
they did it well, they did it successful, and there was a lot that came out of that. Great lessons. I highly recommend you read the Unlikely Statesman about General Petraeus.
Okay.
But to employ the assets that we have, even our engineering uh, community in different areas would be more of a benefit than what it would to simply employ or unleash, as it were, our special forces communities at large.
It would. I mean, let's look at the names: special forces, special operations. They're used in special situations, and I think what they're falling in love with is using it as a first option,
Mm,
replacing the general army, the general uh, force, which still shouldn't be the first option. And back to the point that you made, man, Petraeus, it's like a game of basketball. The highlight of the Warriors dynasty was that everyone had a piece of the rock. They shared the ball. We
yeah,
know that Curry, Clay, Durant were going to shoot the ball, but everyone touched it before that went in. So everyone felt like they were a part of that movement of that bucket.
yeah,
And that goes back to what Petraeus was doing, man. Everyone broke bread with this guy.
yeah,
Everyone felt like
absolutely.
they were vested in the end result. And what this project is talking about doing is taking that effect away. And if you don't feel included, you start feeling like isolated. And when people feel
Mhm.
isolated, they start conjuring up their own ideals, own ideology that could counter what America wants to do. And now we're
Yeah,
creating new adversaries because they're in the dark. And that's
that-
not what we should be doing.
I agree with that. I think the the overall premise or referendums that are encapsulated in Section 2, called the Common Defense, are, but what it sounds like is these folks, and we know how politicians work. You know, they make broad sweeping plans, but they've never set boots on real in real time combat. And
Mhm.
so their action is um, theory at best. It's
Yeah.
theory at best,
Yeah.
and theory is great. You know, it's a part of the process to get to where you want to be. However, practical application is what actually matters at the end
Mhm.
of the day. So when the Center for Army Lessons Learned puts out new information, it's based off of not just theory but practical application of what's happened during joint force training, uh, global training, individual unit training, all of the other good stuff. So
Mhm.
I don't like where they're trying to go with the referendum mentioned inside of uh, their 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 chapters. So I'm a skip around a little bit because I wanna
Okay.
read one of the things that I've been really wanting to read. I don't know if you read it yet.
Yeah.
Is Section G 3, the general welfare, and it's talking about the Department of Education.
Getting rid of it.
Say again?
They want to get rid of the Department of Education.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet,
Yeah.
and I was finna go through it real quick so we can get
Okay.
thoughts on
Yeah.
this.
For sure.
All right, so this is Department of Education, and I got to make this big again. Goodness gracious,
Oh, there we go.
there
Zoom
we
it in
go.
for the people in the back.
For
Yeah.
the people in the back, the cheap seats, that's me.
Them less than 2020 people.
Exactly,
It's all good.
exactly. Hey, I got a prescription. I just don't use it. I don't need it yet. I can still drive at night and sleep
Oh,
perfectly
man.
fine.
Here we
I
go. Here we
Hey,
go.
I'm still
Here
I'm
we go.
still right. I'm at the cusp of not having 2020, but I've taken my eye test and I've still got 2020. So I'm gonna ride out with that. I'm
Hey,
gonna ride.
rock with it, man. They give it to you, rock with
Yeah,
it.
I just got hearing aids. I'm getting used to them. So. All right, let me go through. So I'll read the mission, and then if there's any part or place you want me to stop, let me
Yeah.
know, and I'll pause and play so we can discuss it. So this is
All right.
Department of
Bet.
Education, and this is chaptered by Lindsay M. Burke. Mission: Federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately, the federal Department of Education should be eliminated. When power is exercised, it should empower students and families, not government. In our pluralistic society, families and students should be free to choose from a diverse set of school options and learning environments that best fit their needs. Our post secondary institutions should also reflect such diversity, with room for not only traditional, in quotations, traditional liberal arts colleges and research universities, but also faith based institutions, career schools, military academies, and lifelong learning programs. Elementary and secondary education policies should follow the path outlined by Milton Friedman in 1955. I'm going to have to go back and look at that, wherein
Yeah.
education is,
Same.
yeah, because education is publicly funded, but education decisions are made by families. Ultimately, every parent should have the option to direct his or her child's share of education funding through an education savings account, ESA, funded overwhelmingly by state and local taxpayers, which would empower parents to choose a set of education options that meet their child's unique needs. States are
Hmm.
eager to lead in K 12 education. For decades, they have acted independently of the federal government to pioneer a variety of constructive reforms in school choice programs. For example, in 2011, Arizona piloted ESAs, which provide families roughly 90% of what the state would have spent on that child in public school to be used instead on education options such as private school tuition, online courses, and tutoring. In 2022, Arizona expanded the program to be available to all families. The future of education freedom and reform in the states is bright and will shine brighter when regulations and red tape from Washington are eliminated. Federal money is inevitably accompanied by rules and regulations that keep the influx of funds from having much, if any, impact on student outcomes. It raises the cost of education without raising student achievement. I am going to disagree with that sentence.
Okay.
Um, and the reason why I'm
Well,
not su- I'm
yeah.
not sure exactly which is this still talking about K through 12? Okay. The reason why I'm going to disagree with that, and I'll read it again. Um, Federal money is inevitably accompanied by rules and regulations that keep the influx of funds from having much, if any, impact on student outcomes. It raises the cost of education without raising student achievement. So, how is the federal government raising the cost of education? Is my first question.
That would be mine too.
Yeah, I think.
Um,
Go ahead.
I'm about to say, all right, let me play devil's advocate.
Okay.
Um, the federal government has instituted. I got to research this. This is my assumption.
Hmm.
I think all 50 states, at least at one point, I know when I was coming out of high school, they instituted an exit exam for graduating seniors. Uh, so you went through your 4 years of high school, you passed all your tests mandated by the curriculum. Then there was this new barrier, this new obstacle to conquer, right? New
Hmm.
Thanos. And what it was an exit exam that was developed by the federal government to test your understanding of certain subjects.
Okay.
Uh, now, there was a question of were the teachers teaching towards the test? Some were not. Whether they were or not, things of this nature. That was instituted by the federal government because they said this is the minimum bar that American students should know before they graduate. If you failed the test, guess what, man? You didn't walk with us in May. You were back at school June and July, and you retested in August before the new semester started. And
Okay.
if you pass, here's your certificate. If you get the walk, you don't get the proper circumstance, here you go.
All right.
Now to institute that, the government had to pay people to develop the test, and then they had to pay for the distribution of the test.
Hmm.
So if they're talking about in that regard, okay, I can see that, but that's still a minimum. That's not multi millions of dollars. So playing devil's advocate, if they're talking about barriers benchmarks that the federal government put in place, okay, I can see where you're coming from. Yes, it increased the cost and it didn't really help the students. Debatable, but to say that it brought a great increase in the budget, I think that would be false without further research.
Yeah. And so I don't think so. Japan has what I learned is if in Japan
Hmm.
it's not mandatory to go to high school. And if you do go to high school, you pay.
Yeah,
However, going through middle school essentially is the bare minimum, right? That's their minimum. So what happens in turn is a lot of the people who don't go to a high school and they're not chasing a scholastic uh, career, they
yeah,
start in their trades early, and so
okay.
they begin to develop mastered skills at a young age and produce uh, economically for the country sooner, far sooner than what our student body does and has.
Hmm.
I don't agree with federal tests, exit exams. However, I understand it, and
Yeah,
hopefully the understanding is you should be at the very least in order to have to be productive or competitive globally educationally. Our students should be at this level, and if they're not able to
right.
meet that, well, then maybe some retraining should have happened before. Now, I think that the federal government steps on itself when it begins to impose different um, programs, such as that's the one that just pushes kids along, no, leave no child behind stuff, right?
Oh, George Bush Senior's
George Bush
program.
Senior,
Yeah,
absolutely. Like
yeah.
that hurts us because
Hmm.
instead of a child being held back to go back through the lessons so that they can actually learn and they can get to where they need to be, it becomes a well, just pass them on. And there are
Hmm.
certain behaviors that are created out of that actual uh, view, right? Because now you have somebody who's an 11th or 12th grade that can't read properly, that can't properly identify words, can't
Right.
properly write a paper, so on and so forth, that's simply pushed out
Hmm.
into society. Well, generally speaking, that creates a system, as it were, that cultivates crime, unfortunately, right? So just
Hmm.
pushing kids along, I think is a bad answer. And that again, a program that was implemented by the federal government that can be somewhat the outcome is somewhat agreeable with that, but I don't think by and large that sentence in and of itself actually sums up the educational system as we see
Right.
it.
Mm.
And so I don't see that raising the cost of actually that would be lowering the cost of education because
It would
you
be.
yeah, you're pushing people out, that would be less dependent on the school system.
Mm.
So that's why I can't agree with that sentence.
No, I'm with you. I don't agree with it. Not in
Yes.
the least bit.
Yeah. So I'll continue. To the extent that federal taxpayer dollars are used to fund education programs, those funds should be, wow, those funds should be block granted to states without strings, eliminating the need for many federal and state bureaucrats. Eventually, policymaking and funding should take place at the state and local level, closest to the affected families. And we both know that in certain states, let's take Mississippi. If
Woo!
Mississippi was left to its own demise,
Devices. Yeah.
devices rather, and they implemented that, we know who ain't getting any funding whatsoever. We know what areas will
Who?
be affected the most.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
we're talking about the state that can't even manage water properly. We're talking about the state that let Brett Favre, like,
Right.
uh, like manhandle their education budget. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't I can't. It's just so this is
it's
actually a pretty bad area that
here's
it's not a good look
here's the
so
thing.
far.
Okay, so here's that point, man. So this portion of 2025 that you read about wants
Uh-huh.
to empower the states, right? And I hear
Sure.
a lot of people champion that. Yes, that's great. It's amazing. I'm talking about state rights. But if we go back in history, the Civil War,
Yeah.
people who deny the fact the Civil War, a big component of the Civil War was over slavery, they say,
Yep.
no, it wasn't slavery. It was state rights. Okay, let's
States
go with the argument. What did the states want to do?
right.
Right? Uh,
Yeah.
so fast forward to now, they want to get the power back to the states. Okay, cool. I got it. What a union of states combined to make up the federal government. However, let's go back to the '60s, where the southern states were denying Black people the right to adequate
Absolutely.
education, and the federal government had to step in to enforce that through the civil rights movement,
Yeah.
the Civil Rights Act. So, like you said, some of these states, Texas and Florida, jumped to the forefront of my mind with DeSantos and
Oh my
Roland
goodness.
Abbott,
Oh my
who
goodness.
are stripping back the layers of civil rights. Um,
Yeah.
and this, let me be objective with this. L-
Okay.
I think the assumption would be, I know it's not, but
Hey,
the
Sergeant Major Owens, how you doing? Sergeant Major Owens
idealistic
is
assumption. Oh, what's going on, Sergeant Major? The idealistic assumption would be that the states are electing effective and objective officials, and we know they're not.
yeah.
Politics has is not objective, it's not effective, it's a popularity contest.
Yeah.
And we're not electing the people who are capable of doing the job. So to put it back in the states' hands, man, we become an America that's even more divided. Regions will be operating in sync, and those regions will go further and further apart. And then what do we have? We're creating an environment for a civil war.
Yeah.
That doesn't
It,
make sense.
again, I don't know how familiar you are with the Cornerstone speech
Mhm.
um, by Alexander Stevens given in 1861. Um, but if you read through that doctrine or that document, or even if you just listen to it, if you just listen to it, it's it's starting to spell out everything that they've simply gone through and begun to enumerate, as it were, and break
Mhm.
down to a core level and expand
Mhm.
on. It's literally their foundation. It's literally their actual foundation of getting back to a union and a confederate.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's what this is
Yeah.
beginning to sound like.
Yeah.
So, all right, let me continue reading. Although
Yeah.
student loans and grants should ultimately be restored to the whoa, golly, I couldn't even finish that. All right. Although student loans and grants should ultimately be restored to the private sector, or at the very least, the federal government should revisit its role as guarantor rather than
Huh.
direct lender. Federal
Hmm.
post-secondary education investments should bolster economic growth, and recipient institutions should nourish academic freedom and embrace intellectual diversity. Golly, golly,
Return to the private sector?
I'm trying to get past uh, that first part. Student loans and grants should ultimately be restored to the private sector. Let me tell you something that I think colleges did. Not just
Mhm.
colleges, but what I think predatory lending allowed colleges to do. And I'm saying
Okay.
this in the wake of colleges making billions of dollars on
Whew.
off the debt of Americans by
Yeah.
bolstering a false idea that if you go and attend our institution and you pay what you pay 45, you pay 50, 60, 100,000, $300,000 for this education, and you graduate with a certificate, that you're going to get a job commensurate with the debt that you've incurred.
Mhm.
That is such a fictitious movement, and it should be dealt with. Like, we as adults, 40 plus, 30 plus year old adults, there are people that are in this age, highly
Mhm.
highly certified, highly educated, but are paying off thousands of dollars of debt to the private sector because they engaged in predatory lending. They sold a now, if they made good on that promise, if they would have made good on that promise, they would not have been able to make as much money as they have over decades. This is generational at this point. It's generational.
Yeah.
of amounts of debt. Like people are having to take out second mortgages so their kids can go and attend a college, a university. And these universities are issuing out loans at ridiculous payback rates. Interest rates are through the roof to where if you begin to pay if you when you start paying on it, you'll never be able to pay on the principal. You're always paying on interest. Always paying on interest.
Yeah.
There's no way that we as Americans should agree that student loans and grants should be given over to the private sector. We see what they will do.
I got two data points for you. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
have two data points for you. All right.
Yeah.
One, I'm looking at a chart right now. The median annual earnings of a U.S. college graduate, and just for the listeners and for myself, education, right, matters. Median, different from average. Average, you add everything up, you divide by the number of variables, and you get your average. The median, you line everything up sequentially, and you take that middle number, right? So just to identify the difference of the two. So the median annual earnings of a U.S. college graduate. This chart, boom, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, man. Right now, it's on a downward trend. The median annual earnings is around $52,000.
Oh no. Oh
Back in
no.
2020, it was 56, and then back in 2002 was 55, adjusted for inflation. And then we had some down years in between. So high points, 02, 2020, and since then we've been on the downward dive. The next thing I want to highlight, we're talking about going back to the private sector, bro. We know they are killing us.
Yeah.
They still digging on inflation, and while Apple, Nvidia, Boeing are having record earnings, I know I day trade this stuff, man. Apple stock is like this. It's
Yeah.
right. It's like this. The S&P 500 is like this.
Yes.
They're making record earnings by charging us more money for the same or maybe a lesser product.
Yeah.
I just typed in average loan rate, 720 to 850. Which, let's be real. Let's be real. I'm not gonna say most. There's a portion of us. There's a portion of us that we don't fall in that 720 to 850. We just don't. There's a portion of us that don't.
Yeah.
A nice size portion, not most, but a nice size. The
Yeah.
average loan interest rate for that credit score, this is the top bracket, 10.7 to 12.5.
Oh my
This
goodness.
is calculated for all loans.
Oh my goodness.
What would
Oh
that
my
student
goodness.
loan look like? Listen, your grandchildren will be paying off your college education debt. That's
Yeah.
not what we want.
It's not. And you think like we're just talking about one collegiate year at 50, 60, $70,000. And you've got 40s at the very least for most
Mhm.
degrees, at least 4. So let's take the low end. Let's take $50,000 to attend university. You're already $100,000 in debt, not including interest that it's incurring over those 4 years that you have to
Mhm.
begin to try and deal with as soon as you get out into the market and try to work. There are not many people that actually get out of college and go directly into their field and make enough money directly to begin to combat these loans.
Right.
It's
There's not.
robbery.
Yeah.
It's robbery. So I just I had to pause in place and say that I do agree with student loan debt relief, um, pushed and forced by the federal government because we have forced future generations in debt before they've even had an actual chance to become earners.
Let me jump in right there. Let me be a devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Because the counter argument to that is
Mhm.
I pulled myself up by the bootstraps. I made it from the bottom to the top, to quote old Drake before
Yeah.
the Kendrick debacle, being destroyed by Kendrick. You know what I'm saying? Before,
Yeah,
you know,
slowing
like
down
this.
his career.
Yeah. I made it from the bottom to the top. I pulled
Okay.
myself up by the bootstraps. How do you combat that argument that I
I
was able
think
to pull myself up in the bootstraps?
first off, this is America. Uh,
Uh,
I'm trying to think of a time in American history where people pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. America, in its inception, was built off the economy, the infrastructure, everything was built off the backs of slaves, right? Enslaved
yeah,
peoples. So
yeah,
even when it came to the white population, they at least had fair prices and they maintained jobs, right? They were able to get
yeah.
hired doing something. I think it's an
Mhm.
impossible. I never say that I made it to any place by myself. It's impossible for any of us to make it anywhere by ourselves. We all have to
Mhm.
have some type of assistance along the way. We don't even come into this world by ourselves, and so
Right.
the false narrative of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. Someone helped you somewhere. Someone helped you. Even Drake. Drake was an actor, right? He was Wheelchair Jimmy before he became Drake the Rapper. So
Shout
he
out to Rick
didn't jump
Ross.
in, yeah, he didn't jump into the rap game broke, right?
Right. Facts.
Yeah, President Trump. President Trump was given money and loans from his father. And we talked
That
about
meal
this. Yeah, we talked
back
about
in the
this a little
80s,
bit.
that's a lot of money.
Absolutely. Elon
Mhm.
Musk didn't pull himself
Yeah.
up by the bootstraps, right? So it's hard for me to agree with that rhetoric of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. First off,
Mhm.
again, we're Americans, right? We're close. We have more similarities than differences. And
Yeah.
so when I started talking about student loan debt relief, and it was at like $10,000 or something like that, I was happy
Mhm.
about it, right? Even if I
Yeah.
didn't qualify for it, I was happy about it, especially as a homeowner, understanding that $10,000 of a neighbor's debt has been taken out. They now have $10,000 for home improvements, hopefully, right? So that's going to help the value of the neighborhood increase. Now everybody's winning. Everybody's
Mhm.
winning. Or they're going to
Yeah.
be able to invest in some other form or place in the economy. Again, everybody wins at that point. Even if they put
Mhm.
$10,000 in savings, that helps and allows banks to write more loans to other people.
Right.
So the pushing this back over to a private sector narrative or the whole pulling yourself up by the bootstraps mentality, where again, we are more closely tied together than what we are different. And I think it's a very false and fictitious narrative that has been spun out of control. I don't know any major corporations where the CEOs, the owners, or their children will end up having to live that pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality. I don't,
Mhm.
because somebody had to make the boots. Somebody had to make the strings for the boots. Somebody had to put the sole on. So even if you're tying up boots, those weren't made by you. Those are made by somebody else.
I never thought about it from that way, but you're right. You're right.
It's a slick way for the rich to continue to divide and conquer.
Mm.
Pull yourself up. Be an individual. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Come on, man. That's not why America was formed, and that's also not a thing seated inside of capitalism. At the root of capitalism, it's not.
No, no, but capitalism is about pleasing the stockholder, the bottom line, which incites stockholders, right?
Mhm.
And it's weird because when companies announce layoffs, the stock prices rise because that means the bottom line is getting lighter, and shareholders love that. So I can
Yeah.
only imagine if debt was transferred to the, a capitalist America, bro, they're gonna gut us.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Student loan forgiveness that'll make stock prices go down. CEOs
Yes.
would get fired over that, so that would not even be a conversation.
Agreed. Agreed. That's it's they man. It's yeah. I directly disagree with the narrative of pull yourself up by the bootstraps because we
Hmm.
none do it. We none of
Yeah,
us.
no,
We all have to have some type of help, assistance, uh, some way, shape, form, or fashion.
facts.
So, but all right, let me continue. That has not, however, been the track record of federal higher education policy or of the many institutions of higher education that are hostile to free expression, open academic inquiry, and American exceptionalism. I do not believe in American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism. I do not believe in that. I do not believe in American exceptionalism because it's a phrase shrouded in hatred.
Mm.
It's such a hateful um, superiority place to be. I'm exceptional simply because I'm American. And when you break the term down and you see where it comes from, I'm exceptional because I'm a white American. And you go
Mm.
further, I'm exceptional because I'm a white male American.
That part. That part.
It's
It's
like
like
I
I
went
went
to
to
trying to think
trying to think
something just
something just
failed.
failed.
Getting an
Getting an
echo.
echo.
Give me
Give me
one
one
second.
second.
Can you
Can
hear
you
it?
hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
Did
your
your
Bluetooth go
Bluetooth
out?
go out?
You might
You
have to
might have
turn
to
your
turn
phone
your phone
down.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. Can you
Can you
I
I
can't hear
can't
you.
hear you.
It looked
Look
like
like you
it looked like you're saying a lot, but I can't hear
hear
anything. I
anything.
don't
I don't
know
know
if your
if your
Bluetooth
Bluetooth
went out.
went out.
Let me
Let me
try
try
this.
this.
That's better. Yeah, you back. I don't what now what were you saying?
To them.
All
Ah
right,
man,
what were
see
you
technology, man. Apple tried to shut me out.
saying?
I was saying, okay, America, the ghost of Steve Jobs.
Right?
All right, so what I was saying was American exceptionalism. One of the canons in that is morally superior country, right? And I was tying that to mass shootings.
Oh wow,
We
yeah.
lead the world in mass shootings, right? No one
Hmm.
can touch us. To the point that there were memes and jokes that were made because the American shooting team couldn't even medal in the Olympics.
Wow.
And they had memes saying that postal workers and school children are scratching their heads wondering how the American shooting team could have medal because they get so much practice back home.
Oh my goodness. That's embarrassing.
What other country would ever say that? So American exceptionalism, I'm with you, man. I'm
Yeah.
with you.
It's such a fictitious narrative.
Yeah,
If you look at our education system at large, we are failing. If you look at
yeah.
where America actually ranks globally, I think the study was out of 127, 124, 127 countries.
Mhm.
Um, we ranked number 99.
What's coming in?
Yeah, we ranked 99 out of 100. I think it's either 124 or 127 countries. We ranked 99.
Dang, the top 100?
Yeah,
Okay, out of countries. I'm gonna Google how
yeah.
many countries are there in the world? You said it. Okay, according. It's so sad that it's funny. You said we ranked 99.
Yeah.
I just put in
Overall,
Google how many countries there in the world. Before I give you the answer, what do you think the number is?
Uh, not 100% sure.
Any guess?
Any guess?
Yeah.
There's over. I'd say over 200.
Okay, according to this one site from World Meter, this is the first answer in Google, which is debatable with how Google does an algorithm.
Okay.
195 countries in the world today.
Okay.
And
I
we rank 99.
Yeah, we're ranked 99.
That's let's round it up to 200.
Yeah, we can round it up to 200.
We're the top 49%.
Okay. And here's what's even worse about that, right? The places that former President Trump called shithole countries outrank us.
Ah,
They outrank us. A lot of the countries in Africa outrank us. Our adversaries outrank us. There are so like it was when I read it, when I first looked at it, I had to I was like, wait a minute. I'll send you the table and I'll send you the data that I saw. Um, but on all accounts, when I looked at where America ranked as far as livability and best countries in the world,
mhm.
we did not come even close to the top. Not even close.
Yeah.
So the idea of American exceptionalism, that is such an old thought and paradigm that it makes no sense to continue to say that. Anyway, let me continue to read this.
All right.
Uh, Federal post-secondary policy should be more than massive, inefficient, and open-ended subsidies to traditional colleges and universities. It should be rebalanced to focus far more on bolstering the workforce skills of Americans who have no interest in pursuing a four-year academic college. It should be,
Workforce.
yeah,
Employee again. We're speaking employee. Okay.
yeah, wow. Uh, It should reflect a fuller picture of learning after high school, placing apprenticeship programs of all types and career and technical education on an even playing field with degrees from colleges and universities, rather than continuing to buttress a higher education establishment captured by woke diversicrats uh, and a de facto monopoly enforced by the federal accreditation cartel. Federal post-secondary education policy should prepare students for jobs in the dynamic economy, nurture institutional diversity, and expose schools to greater market forces. I I, I don't like where they're going with that, but overview.
No. Yeah.
For most of our history, the federal government played a minor role in education. Then, over a 14-month period beginning in 1964,
Mm,
uh, yep, yep, yep,
mm.
yep, yep, yep. I know where you.
60s. Okay.
Yep,
Oh,
yep.
wait, what happened?
I wonder
64.
what happened.
Okay.
I wonder what happened. My goodness. Wow. Then, over a 14-month period beginning in 1964, Congress planted the seeds for what would become the U.S. Department of Education, ED, or the department. In July of that year, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964 after Congress reached a consensus that the mistreatment of Black Americans was no longer tolerable and merited a federal response. In the
Mhm.
case of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, ESEA, and the Higher Education Act of 1965, HEA, Congress sought to improve educational outcomes for disadvantaged students by providing additional compensatory funding for low income children and lower income college students. Spending on ESEA and the HEA, part of Johnson's war on poverty, grew
Mhm.
exponentially in the years that followed. By fiscal year 2022, ESEA programs received 27.7 billion in appropriations, in addition to 190 billion that came through the pandemic's elementary and secondary schools emergency relief funds, which relied on ESEA formulas. The same year, the department spent more than 2 billion just to administer Title IV of the HEA, which authorizes federal student loans and Pell Grants. It provided 22.5 billion in Pell Grants, and it oversaw outlays of close to 100 billion in direct student loans. Since 1965, Congress has continued to layer on dozens of new laws and programs as federal solutions to myriad education programs. In 1973, it passed the Rehabilitation Act, and in 1975, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, to address educational neglect of students with disabilities. In 2002, it created the Institution of Education Sciences to consolidate education data collection and fund research. Congress has also enacted a series of Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Acts, including Perkins 5 in 2018. Congress could have and once did distribute management of federal education programs outside of a single department. But those interested in expanding federal funding and influence in education, this unconsolidated approach was less than ideal because a single captive agency would allow them to promote their agenda more effectively across administrations. Eventually, the National Education Association made a deal and backed the right presidential candidate, Jimmy Carter, who successfully lobbied for and delivered the cabinet level agency. When it was established in 1979, becoming operational in 1980, the agency was supposed to act as a corralling mechanism. Carter signed the Department of Education Organization Act into law in 1979, believing in part that it would reduce administrative costs and improve efficiency by housing most of the federal education programs that had proliferated in the wake of Johnson's war on poverty under one roof. It has had the opposite effect. Instead, special interest groups like the National Education Association, NEA, American Federation of Teachers, AFT, and the Higher Education Lobby have leveraged the agency to continuously expand federal expenditures, a desirable funding stream for their vantage point because federal budgets are not constrained like state and local budgets that
Mhm.
must be balanced each year. Yeah, I agree with that part.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, by FY 2022, the department's discretionary and mandatory appropriation topped 80 billion, not including student loan outlays. Each of its programs has attendant federal strings and red tape, which of course is the federal government. That's what's going to come along with it,
Yeah,
right? That's part of it.
it,
One
it is.
recent example is the here we go. The blame in this is ridiculous. One recent example is the Biden administration's requirement that state education agencies and school districts submit equity plans as a condition of receiving COVID recovery ESSER funds in American Rescue Plan. This exercise led to the hiring of numerous new government employees as the rules were promulgated. Plans were created for or after collecting public feedback, and those plans were eventually deemed satisfactory. The next administration will need to plan to redistribute the various congressionally approved federal education programs across the government, eliminate those that are ineffective or duplicative, and then eliminate the unproductive red tape and rules by entrusting states and districts with flexible, formula-driven block grants. This chapter details that plan. As the next administration executes its work, it should be guided by a few core principles, including here we go. Buckle up. Advancing education freedom. Empowering families to choose among a diverse set of education options is key to reform and improvement outcomes. And it can be achieved without establishing a new federal program. For example, portability of existing federal education spending to fund families directly or allowing federal tax credits to encourage voluntary contributions to K through 12 education savings accounts managed by charitable nonprofits could significantly advance education choice, providing education choice for federal children. Congress has special Congress has a special responsibility to children who are connected to military families who live in the District of Columbia or who are members of sovereign tribes. Responsibility for serving these students should be housed in agencies that are already serving these families. Restoring state and local control over education funding. As
Mm.
Washington, yeah, yeah, that doesn't feel right at all.
Okay. What is it? What does that say?
It says, as Washington begins to downsize its intervention in education, existing funding should be sent to states as grants over which they have full control, enabling states to put federal funding toward any lawful education purpose under state law. Let's take Louisiana,
Mm.
and let's take Louisiana and what they've recently done by forcing the Ten Commandments back into schools, regardless of the population that it actually serves. This is dangerous
Yeah, yeah.
because the schools that refuse to interfere with the parents' right to teach their children religion at their house and begins to essentially push their dogma onto children is is scary for the simple fact that if the schools who do not comply to this refuse it, they're not going to receive the state funds that they're requesting or saying they want to give back to the states. And we know this. Again, we can take Mississippi. I don't you can't trust anything to Mississippi politicians.
Dude, no, except for making money, fattening their pockets.
That's it. That is it. This is not a good look. This is
It,
not a good look.
not in the least bit. Not in the least bit. It's crazy because America. A lot of people say America is a Christian country. America is not a Christian country. America is a country where you're free to worship in Christianity
Absolutely.
or any other religion of your choice.
Yeah.
However, what you just read is showing that America is trying to indoctrinate children into the Christian mindset that
Yeah.
goes against the found. Bro, these people hopped on the boat, crossed the freaking Atlantic from UK, from a civilized country at that point in time,
Quote unquote.
to well, I mean, okay,
And
okay,
I'll go back to that once you finish. I'll
yeah,
say
okay, okay, okay. Uh, let's say it was more technologically advanced in America. I
okay.
think
Yeah.
that's a fair statement.
Yeah. That is.
All right, they crossed the boat, man, risking weather, waves. These cats had seasickness. They ain't have the liberty of putting that little band-aid behind their ear like folks have on the cruise ships. You had to
Agreed.
tough it out. They came over here to this new land, did some terrible things. But rewind, they came here to live a free life. Freedom of persecution of religion was one of the tenets that they said is written in the freaking, they love the Constitution. It's written in there. But they're diverting back. They're becoming the country that those immigrants ran from, which is crazy to me, man. Makes no freaking sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So I say that uh, UK, England, that whole area was quote
Yeah.
unquote civilized because the people that came from there over here
Hmm.
committed atrocities
Oh
and
yeah.
and savage ways.
Hmm.
And for them to just come over here and be able to engage in those types of behaviors directly shows that they were never a civilized country. They were a country steeped in savagery, steeped in superiority complexes, and also were the peoples who had to be taught how to bathe.
Hmm. Hmm.
So more technologically advanced, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. But civilized, I cannot say that because when
I give
talking
you that.
about yeah, civilization, um, that's also civilization or being civilized takes into account how you're able to actually interact with another person in
Hmm.
civil manner, as it were. If you can't act in a civil manner to an individual, you are not a civilized person. And that definition can be expanded to a group of people.
Man, listen, I was about to say there's a certain region of the world where, with that definition, which you're absolutely right, they were the savages.
Oh, absolutely.
And just going back to the Constitution, man, that people always talk about the First Amendment, and they forget kind of like how people talk about the Second Amendment. First Amendment, they always say freedom of speech, rah 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 rah. The First Amendment has is two clauses within that amendment. Freedom of speech is the second clause. It's not
Mm,
even the first in the First Amendment. The first clause, I'm reading it from the Constitution. Congress shall make no laws respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom that it goes into freedom of speech. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. If you're putting the Ten Commandments within a school, what are you doing? Is that not going against the First Amendment?
It absolutely is. Um, and even with that being said, if the Ten Commandments is allowed to be in schools at the state level,
Mhm.
why
Mhm.
can't any other uh, religious law be placed in to that same building for
Wait,
observance purposes?
heresy! Heresy! Oh, the sacrilegious! Burn them at the cross!
But that would be equal and equitable observance.
Yeah, yeah,
You
they
know,
can't enunciate that phrase that you just said. It's incomprehensible, man.
oh my
They're
goodness,
gonna
yeah,
throw they're gonna throw holy water in you, which is now these days the sunning.
that's for real, right?
Yeah,
That didn't Dasani just recently call back? Let me not say that. Allegedly recall uh, some bottles because it was meant anyway. I'm gonna look back
yeah,
into that.
yeah. I read
I
that.
thought so. I thought so. But all right, let me get to this next bullet.
All right.
Uh, treating taxpayers like investors in federal student aid. Okay.
Mhm.
The reason why I'm sighing at that is I don't know how many people actually invest in anything outside of if they're able to afford a home nowadays,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
If even like how many people are actually investing in stock market, their Roth IRAs, even when it comes to retirement funds.
Mhm.
So, and I blame that on it's sheer ignorance, right? Generally speaking, a lack of
Mhm.
understanding how that game is played. But all right, anyway, treating
No, you're
taxpayers,
right.
treating tax,
Absolutely.
yeah, treating taxpayer like investors in federal student aid. Taxpayers should expect their investments in higher education to generate economic productivity. I agree with that.
Yeah.
When the federal government lends money to individuals for a post secondary education, taxpayers should expect those borrowers to repay.
I
Yes and
don't get
no.
my money back.
Look,
The- Hold on, wait. Let me look at my wallet, bro.
hey.
Nah, it's still as flat as it was this morning, last year. It's gotten smaller. This is how small because I don't get anything back from
Right.
paying taxes.
Look,
Okay, I just had to check. I didn't check. My bad. I didn't mean to
that's
interrupt. My
this is crazy.
bad.
This is crazy. Taxpayers should expect because what it's saying is the predatory loans that again those lenders are making
What?
billions of dollars. Average
Yes.
Americans, not just average, like even upper middle class Americans,
Mhm.
are struggling to meet the basic requirements to where they could pay at least 5% on principal and 95% on interest rates because of their it's ludicrous. And so I say forgive them all. And the reason why you forgive them all, if a person is willing to go into post secondary education and take those loans out and work and work and work and work, forgive those loans as long as they are able to make the median principal amount of that loan as income so that they can actually reinvest into the community as a taxpayer.
Can I can I answer the point right there?
Yeah.
All right, so I just Googled uh money made on student loans. A post from Government Accountability Office, GAO.gov. This is just a quick excerpt. This is from 2022. Um, they estimate that the money generated from student loans is $197 billion.
I know.
That,
I know.
that was at the end of 2022.
Jeez.
Go ahead. I just want to put that in there. 100, almost 200 billion. Oh my lord, $200 billion.
This is and that's listen, there was I can't remember exactly when it happened.
Mhm.
It was so back in 2000 um 2009, 2010. I was having a conversation with my first son at the time, and he was talking about um, people who use Medicare, Medicaid, and them being the reason why uh, medical expenses are so high.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I
Okay.
said, well, I said no. Just because somebody else is relying on the government to advocate for them instead of having to pay $100 for a pill that costs 5 cents to make, the federal government advocates they get it for a cost instead of $100, they might get it for 45. Now the
Hmm.
company's still making money, right? But they just want to make more.
Yeah.
So the federal government cuts the cost and they sell the pill to the actual individual, right?
Hmm.
And it's compensated about through various different engines and means. I
Hmm.
said, however, it's impossible to correlate your insurance going up with someone who is being provided Medicare because of the pharmaceutical companies. It's not they're not a drag on the company. And he was like, "Well, how do you say that?" I said, "Because if you look at what these corporations have made in the quarter, their fiscal quarter, they are still making billions of dollars.
Oh yeah.
Quarter. You are not cutting in to their bottom line. There's and
No.
that and I researched it. That was even after paying all the workers. That was paying any legal fees that the corporations may have been facing. That was paying out the actual CEO, so on and so forth of these corporations. They're still making billions of dollars per quarter. The average American is not stressing these companies out to the point that they have to produce pills that again would cost them 3 to 5 cents and sell them for $100, sell them for 250, $300. It's not it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
So anyway, I'm equating the taxpayer with that and these student loans because like you just read, these are billions of dollars, and I had the last time I actually looked at the number was it was before 2022, but even during that time, uh, the loans were making billions of dollars, and they've been doing this for generations.
But just to add context, 200 bill, you talk about countries and GDP. Student loan debt in America, 200 billion. It's rounded up from 197 to 200 billion. That is more than the
Sure.
GDP, the gross domestic product of the countries Greece, Kuwait, which has oil, Morocco, Ethiopia, Slovakia, Ecuador, the DR, Kenya, so forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Countries, man.
I agree with this comment right here by Miss Turner. Hello, thank you for hopping in. Universal healthcare is needed in this country. USA is behind in times. Absolutely, it absolutely is. But
You know,
go ahead,
oh,
go
go
ahead,
ahead. What you about to say? What you about to say?
because I was going to push forward with the student loans. But go ahead.
I, mm, I universal health care is another topic. I have some contrary view. I like her statement. I also have some dissenting views on that, but that's another topic. Let's go with
Yeah,
student
yeah.
loans.
So we'll get together. We'll make a schedule so we
Yeah.
can actually come back and begin to address. I wish I had my notebook so I could write these points down.
Oh,
Uh,
you know what? I got you. I got you. Say
all right,
less.
right on, right on. Looks like this is about to become a thing.
Oh, yeah, I got you, bro. I get you. Yo, you inspire me to read more.
So to the next point, protecting the federal student loan portfolio from predatory politicians, which I don't disagree with that statement because there are a lot of politicians who are actually invested in private sector loans. That's
Yeah.
another topic for another time. That's just the way it rolls. That's one of the reasons why they push back against student loan forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
So
Hello, Nancy. Hello, Tuberville. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Democrat, Republican. Both
Democrats
sides.
and
Let's not act
Republicans
like
are
it's one
like,
side.
yes, yes. This is one of the reasons why I do not align myself with any party. I will not. I
Wait, how do young people
refuse.
do? How do young people do?
Is that what they do now?
That yeah, this is what my son killed me with this. I'll make a point like, I dad. Like, but don't I don't know whether to clap or hit you. I don't know what to do.
All right. So it says the new administration must end the practice of acting like the federal student loan portfolio is a campaign fund to curry political support and votes. The new administration must end abuses in the loan forgiveness programs. Goodness gracious.
Mm,
Borrowers should be expected to repay their loans. I disagree with that whole point.
mm,
I disagree with. I'm gonna tell you now, and I still got to pay student loans, and I didn't finish college.
mhm,
But if another American is able to get their student loans forgiven, by all means, you take it and you run with it.
mhm,
You take it and you run with it. Safeguarding civil rights. Let's see what this says.
mm.
Enforcement of civil rights should be based on a proper understanding of those laws, reject gender ideology, and critical race theory. There's so much wrong with that small point. That's
So hold
almost
on,
like
civil rights, right? It started in the '60s with their how they treated us, right? Let
yes,
alone how they treated Native Americans, Chinese, other
yes,
minorities. We took up
yes.
the mantle and we changed those laws. Civil rights, rejecting critical race theory, which was the epitome. That was the seed that started,
So
bro.
I'll tell you a secret about critical race theory, and you and I might have talked about this the last time you were here. By the way, when the next
Yeah,
time you coming, man?
bro. You know what? We do these. I'll come out there even more often to do a
Okay.
joint thing, man, in the same room.
All right. So here's the actual truth about critical race theory. One of the reasons why critical race theory, as
Hmm.
far as it is talked about from their
Yeah.
aspect, uh,
Uh-huh.
want they want to curtail it is because it actually looks into the actual legal system and how it's been um, abused and pushed and affected negatively different cultures of American society. However, our educational system overall actually teaches a form of critical race theory, and that form of critical race theory, unfortunately, as American exceptionalism is the phrase, is white critical race theory.
Hmm.
That's what
Hmm.
it teaches. So they're not so much opposed to critical race theory if it's talking about American exceptionalism, that phrase again that I highly disagree with, but they're against critical race theory when it actually looks in depth at the laws and the structure of America to pull back the onion and push forth what America actually looks like. It
Hmm.
crushes all the ideals that have been planted in everybody's minds about America, and it shows the ugliness of America as it is.
Hmm.
That's what critical race theory does. Rejecting gender ideology. I have no issue with a person who wishes to identify as another gender. What I won't agree with, however, is them epistolizing it and trying to make me believe against science what they want to say. However, at the end of the day, they're still humans and they deserve, according to our Constitution, they deserve to enjoy their constitutional rights unabridged, unimpeached, and without fault. When we bring in so I'm saying this because earlier in my readings a couple of days ago,
Yeah.
one of the things that it this doctrine aimed to eliminate was transgenders in the military because it says that there's no place for transgenders in the military. Again, this is being written by people who have never set foot on a
In the
battlefield.
military. Right.
And my response to that is I don't care what you feel like you are, as long as your ass is out there laying rounds down range when we need it to happen. That's what matters.
You know, okay, on that point, I'm going to I used to have a word for this. Push back a little bit, but that's not the
Sure.
word. That's a whole freaking phrase.
Requama?
Um reclama this.
Yeah, Requama.
When you're transitioning, and even when you're in that new state, and correct me if I'm wrong, you need hormone boosters, medication to keep
Sure.
you in a state that you were not born in, correct?
Yes. It's a sustained thing. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, in the battlefield, I was Iraq, I was Afghanistan. It's a very uh, hostile environment. And we were
Mhm.
lucky to get, that's why we were happy for surf and turf days. Many days it was scheduled, many days it didn't come. The days it did, it was a delight because
Sure.
logistics was always a challenge. And you
Yeah.
know that better than me. Um, so if logistics is a challenge in those hostile environments, especially in those farms, those way out there. If you have a transgender person there and they're not able to get their medication at the rate, at the frequency they're supposed to get it, would that not be a liability?
That's a great question, and it's something to think about, but especially when it comes to logistics, right? If
Hmm.
when you were in Iraq, there's something that I'm sure you saw, and that was the different caution posts about the snakes, right?
Yeah.
Particularly vipers.
Hmm.
One of the things that the caches or the medical units kept on hand in surplus was antivenom,
Hmm.
right? That way, if a patient or if a soldier suffered an attack or accident, like the building that I slept in, up under it, I found out there was a den of vipers and I didn't know it. Yeah, craziness. But literally a den of vipers, and I saw them jokers moving at night. Uh, however,
Nice, nice.
however, we didn't suffer many bites in Iraq from vipers. There were the occasional fools who would go out and play with them, so on and so forth.
That's a different category.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely different category. But those caches, those combat supply hospitals or the medic centers, they had a surplus of the antivenom on hand.
Okay.
The same thing
Okay.
could happen, right, with
Mhm.
the medications that the soldiers who have transitioned need to sustain where they are.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that it absolutely can be a liability to the individual. However, if we get ahead of it and we plan for it logistically, just like we do MREs, right? We,
Mm.
we we
Mhm.
push MREs forward to sustain us for at least 21 days, right?
Mhm.
That's just in the field. That's not even counting in an actual theater, but they're pushed forward and they're maintained at the SSA yard in the
Mhm.
event something happens and our supply chain gets cut off. We have something in the Army called the operational load. And every unit is supposed to actually have a specific amount, operational and basic load,
Mhm.
specific amount of basic necessities to sustain them for a specific amount of time until they can get a resupply, right? And then, depending on the area you're in, it can be bigger or it can be smaller. Hey, Cuzzo, it can be bigger or it can be smaller. It will fluctuate, but there's still something that is there to sustain for a specific amount of time. And if that time runs out, if you get into critical situations, that's when we begin to do aerial resupply operations. So
Okay.
it's possible just because a person is transgendered, right? And they may have these chemical battles that they have to fight does not mean that logistically we cannot support them with the medication that they need because we absolutely can. We can do it with food, we can do it with water, we can do it with weapons, we can do it with munitions. We've got the capabilities.
Um, you know what? I, to your point, you're right. I have to stand that. I have to retreat on my argument with that point you just made because the cachet. And then, as you were talking, I thought about that phrase, the 82nd Airborne, right? The 82nd Airborne is the Army's only division capable of executing airborne joint forcible entry anywhere in the world in 18 freaking hours. So if we
Yeah,
can get people and
yeah,
equipment on a plane and drop them from the sky in 18 hours, surely we can get medicine within 72.
absolutely. Shout out to cousin Lawanda, one of my cohorts for the family bloodline when we live Friday nights. They won their volleyball game. Super job. Rounds of applause.
That's what's
Round
up. That's what's
of
up.
applause.
Hello, so is it kids volleyball, adults volleyball?
It's adults volleyball.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
Quarter saying.
Yeah, they be on it. They be on it. I love it.
Is it
I love hearing about
quarter
it.
saying?
They're saying. Oh, wait, no, y'all on the court, ain't you, Wanda? I think they're on the court. It's not
Adult
saying.
Ooh, that's tough,
Yeah.
man. You know what? If I was adult volleyball, I gotta be on sand, man.
Oh,
Running
snap.
too
They
soft for
insane.
that.
I was wrong.
Huh?
They're insane.
Ooh, it's tough to move, man.
Yeah,
It's tough to
that's a
move.
workout. That is a
Hey, and
workout.
they won?
They won.
Hey,
They won. I
kudos.
think,
I like
yeah,
that.
for sure. Let me continue. So it's the other point is stop execution, stop executive overreach.
Mm,
Congress should set policy. not presidents through pen and phone executive orders, and not agencies through regulations and guidance.
Mm,
National emergency declarations should expire absent express congressional authorization within 60 days after the date of declaration. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like they all three matches. Good God, holy cow! I'm sorry, they played three matches and they won all three. They killed it.
ooh,
But that sounds as if it's a signal towards let's take Katrina for example,
okay.
where American citizens, and I don't want anybody to lose this point. We have to stay on this point of American citizens, where
Okay.
American citizens had their livelihoods absolutely destroyed.
Hmm.
There was nothing left for them. Everything had to be rebuilt. Now, here were the dynamics in that. If it expired within 60 days, that would have increased the homeless population exponentially. That's
Hmm.
one point. The second point is um, what that gives way to is it allows predatory purchasers to go into underdeveloped areas that have been destroyed by natural disasters and commit gentrification, as it were, right?
Hmm.
Because they're not going to get back. They're not going to be back to work in 60 days. They're not earning again in 60
No,
days. The
no.
government is supposed to take care of its people, and sometimes that is longer. We don't need any more. Yeah, we don't. We do not need any more unhoused. And the government is here to protect the people, take care of the people, especially in times where national emergencies occur.
Hmm.
That has to happen. And so to simply say, "Hey, we you got 60 days to get your shit back together," I think that's a bit just disingenuous, and it shows the hard-heartedness of the authors of this doctrine.
Right.
So I disagree with that part.
I yeah. Okay. Just for a reference, right?
Hmm.
It takes FEMA around 30 days just to deploy. So by the time they get that's just to deploy. That's not accounting for getting the setup,
Yeah.
which could be another 30 days. Uh, at the end of that 60, that's 60 days total. That presidential declaration could expire. Congress is like, we don't agree. And FEMA is just going back home because Congress is infighting, which we all know bipartisanship is a thing of the past at this point. It
Right.
doesn't even exist. It's like good horror movies. You can't find them.
You cannot.
Um, so I'm
It's
with
really
you on
hard.
that. It's really hard. And so what's funny about this document is how it's attacking agencies, and there are a lot of issues with the agencies that we have. I'm not going to act like they're perfect. However, the makeup of the agencies, you have the civil workers and you have the government workers, you have experts in that field that are also embodied within that agency. That's what
Yeah.
makes it special. So one of the things that the Supreme Court did was destroy the Chevron Act, which I thought was about the gas station, but when I read into it, it is not.
I haven't read it
It
yet.
Oh, the premise, because I thought it was a gas station. It's not. So the premise of it is when courts have it started with the EPA.
Yeah.
If there's if somebody sues a ruling from an agency, in this case was the EPA, the judges have to defer to that agency's definition of that specific rule
Hmm.
and to see if there's merit in the case or not. Because that agency has the experts to define that rule. So Congress would
Oh,
say Americans should have access to safe water. Congress does not have the people or the expertise to say what defines safe water.
sure.
However, let's say the EPA, I could be wrong, could be another agency, but let's say the EPA has the specialists that could define we need these ingredients to make water safe.
Yeah.
Somebody sues and says, I don't think this is safe drinking water. That judge, who is also not trained on what safe drinking water is, has to defer to the agency's definition of that.
Okay.
The Supreme Court did away with the Chevron Act.
Oh
Judges
no.
can now, they are not forced to defer to that agency's definition. they can now use their own ingenuity, their own thoughts, their own understanding of that rule to make a decision, which is freaking scary.
Flint,
Um,
Michigan is so that
Flint, Mississippi, right?
they're
Places like that, especially. So this document is a further attack on those agencies, which are flawed. I give you that,
yeah.
but I'd rather go with those flawed agencies than Matt Gates.
Holy cow!
Who's it? The new VP who may or may not have had sex with a sofa.
Wait, what?
Yeah, dude, the AP, the National AP Association, the Associated Press had to rescind an article that said that the VP, Donald Trump's VP candidate, has sex with a sofa because he mentioned it in his book. But he said it was a metaphor, so they had to rescind that because the only fact that stated that was his own book.
Oh my goodness!
And, did the sofa give consent? That's a whole nother topic. We don't know.
Right, right. Let's just take advantage of the sofa. It
But
can't move. It's there.
exactly. But what we're saying is we're putting these decisions back in the hands of people like him again. He attributes climate change to daylight savings time.
What? Now,
You
now
can
I got.
research that.
I got to go look and follow his. I just want to need. There's a need. There's a
Yes.
need for me to try and figure out his logic, or at least read about his logic, because he's a case study at that point.
This is an interesting cat. This is a cat that hated Trump in the beginning, and now he's kissing Trump's ass. But that's another discussion. But what we're saying is we're putting Congress is not equipped to write laws that state um, to define something.
Yeah,
They say people are entitled to X. What is the definition of X? We're not equipped to do that. We have these agencies with specialists who study this to
yeah.
do that. That's how we're made. But they want to take that away in this instance from the Department of Education and say, hey, Congress, you're equipped to do that. No, they are not. These people
No,
have degrees in a multitude of different subjects that do not
primarily.
align with education.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So let me continue. And what
Uh,
I'll do, uh, and we'll figure out where to pick this up. But I'll continue reading this. I'll read needed reforms, and then we'll stop at trends in the fourth and eighth grade reading, and we'll pick that up next time we come on.
gotcha.
All right. So needed reforms. Federal intervention in education has failed to promote student achievement. After trillions spent since 1965 on the collective programs now housed within the walls of the department, student academic outcomes remain stagnant. On the main National Assessment of Education Progress, NAEP, reading outcomes on the 2022 administration have remained unchanged over the past 30 years. Declines in math performance are even more concerning than students' lack of progress on reading outcomes. Fourth and eighth grade math scores saw the largest decline since the assessments were first administered in 1990. Average fourth grade math scores declined 5 points, and average eighth grade math scores declined 8 points. Just one third of eighth graders nationally are proficient in reading and math. Just 27% of eighth graders were proficient in math in 2022. And just 31% of eighth graders scored proficient in reading in 2022. I'd like to know where they actually got this information. I want to go look at it myself.
Yeah, I would
Uh,
like to know what that benchmark is also.
yeah. The NAEP long term trend assessment shows academic stagnation since the 1970s, with particular stagnation in the reading scores of 13-year-old students since 1971, when the assessment was first administered. Math scores, though modestly improved, are still lackluster. Additionally, the department has created a shadow Department of Education operating in states across the country.
Hmm.
It, there we go with that shadow man stuff, but maybe
Oh,
I'll, for now, I'll take them at their word. I mean,
that's is that the same? Is that the same dude that Aaron Rodgers was seeing?
it's a shadow department. I mean, it's I guess they're operating like the homeowners associations, but
Okay.
uh, federal mandates, federal mandates, programs, and proclamations have spurred a hiring spree among state education agencies, with more than 48,000 employees currently on staff in state agencies across the country.
Hmm.
Those employees are more than 10 times the number of employees, which was 4,400, at the Federal Department of Education, and their jobs largely entails reporting back to Washington. Research conducted by the Heritage Foundation's Jonathan Butcher finds that the federal government funds 41% of the salary cost of state education agencies. Again, I'd like to see where they got their information from outside of internal research that was done. Um, this is a Heritage Foundation document, and so to give me information based off of their own research doesn't do well by me.
I, hey, just from their first title, Heritage Foundation, a research and education institution whose mission is to build and promote conservative public
Yeah,
policy. So they're biased.
yeah, they're
Okay.
absolutely biased.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's exactly what that is. And
Hmm.
so we'll pause in place. There was a lot that we just covered. Uh, Great commentary, and we're gonna continue to dig into this because this is scary information. Um,
Yes.
it's circular logic, unfortunately, and it's also a bit of uh, self victimizing, right? When you look at some of the things that they talk about, especially when they talk about critical race theory, when they talk about transgenderism, so on and so forth, it's a fear that's encapsulated in the rhetoric that they're actually stating,
Hmm.
and a lot of it hinges on their personal religious beliefs. So they're not separating church and state first off, and they're not holding to the tenets of the Constitution. Earlier in my reading, it directly talked about the next conservative president needs to have a team that's built up of chasing that president's agenda. It mentioned actually upholding the Constitution statutes once. Everything else was being loyal to the next conservative president, right? So this is a deeply flawed uh, document, and
Yeah.
I came into I wanted to begin to read the document, and I had a very unbiased movement towards it
Mhm.
until I began to dig into it. And I'm not reading it from the aspect of simply just being a Black American, but I'm also reading it from the aspect of being an American,
Mhm.
and it damages our society at whole. That's where I am with it so far until it can change my mind.
It's a lot of people. I'm glad we're doing these series because a lot of people don't know. I was in the barbershop not too long ago. As you can see, my edge up's getting a little faded. Um, and a lot of cats in there, it was probably like 8 cats, man. Never heard of Project 2025 or Agenda 47, which is a repeat of Project 2025. It's written in a nicer tone, but the tenets are still there.
Okay.
They had never heard of it. I'm like, and I can't wait till we get the part about police immunity. Um, that's in there. It's scary, man. And I know a lot of people they're down with Trump or mess with Trump because of the economy. He put money in their pockets, and I understand that. But when you look at like the gross domestic product, which is a fair, objective way of measuring the U.S. economy under presidents,
Agreed.
uh, uh, Trump, looking at this site, this is a Vestopedia. People can look up different sites. Numbers might change to the left to the right slightly, but I imagine it's still centered. The gross domestic product grew 2.3% under Trump. Under Biden, it's 2.2. Under Obama, 2.3. Looking at the past 10, 15 presidents, highlights FDR,
Mm.
10%. He brought us out of the Great Depression, Democrat. Gerald Ford, 5.4%, Republican. Uh, oh, oh, they're martyr. Ronald Reagan, 3.6%
Oh wow.
Republican. The next over 3% cat was our saxophone player, Bill Clinton, 4%.
Okay.
No one else, those are the only, oh, Linda B had 5.2, Democrat. Only people, those are the only people over 3% as far as GDP growth. So I get people saying that Donald Trump put money in their pockets. Money came in different forms of fashion. Under the Biden administration, the IRS has recouped, I think, a couple of $1 billion from rich people and taken back tax money. Right?
Hmm.
That's good. I still see the scary because they're going to come after us pretty soon. Right? They're not just going to solely focus on the rich. Um, so I would just encourage people to look past the few dollars that Donald Trump gave us and look at the long term, at the damage that if this policy goes into place, that it will cause America in the long term, and the short term monetary benefit that we may gain under his presidency. You got to ask yourself, is it worth the long term damage to the country? Just look at the Supreme Court. We're going to face 6-3 decisions for the rest of this tenure of the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
And so far, those 6-3 decisions, I think most people would think are not the best decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. So President Biden has recently rolled out an amendment to the terms
Mhm.
for SCOTUS. And I'm going to look into it a little bit more. I want to read into it a little bit more, but it
Me
does
too.
place term limits on them. But
Mhm.
I don't want them to stop there. Congress needs to have term limits as well. Uh, Senators need to have term limits as well. So Wanda said she heard that Trump is saying he doesn't want anything to do with this policy. No, no, it's not true. So it's not that he doesn't want anything to do with this policy. Uh, like Deuce just stated, Agenda 47 is his essentially, and it's nothing less than a soft core version of Project 2025. But it says the same stuff. It says the same stuff, and so what? Yeah, all need to have term limits. So what we might do is we it's something that we will have to have a discussion about offline to bounce back and forth between the two to start the Agenda 47 document to start reading that also
Yeah.
along with Project 2025 to see where these points align. And then follow that up with a final listening, at the very least, to the cornerstone speech, which is the foundation of both of these movements. It's listen, I celebrate all religions, and I'm happy for everyone who has found solace in deity. Uh, Even if you're atheist, I'm happy that you found some sort of solace in something, right? Whether it be external or internal. The issue that I have is when you have extremists who believe that because they hold a thing personal, that everyone needs to jump on board. And it begins to hurt people. And you strip away something that you're supposed to believe in, which is free will. So you begin to go directly against the tenets of your own religion when you
Yeah.
put out documents like this. So this is such a fear anyway. That's where I am. I think we got to get offline, and we have to let's figure out how we're going to dissect Agenda 47 as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Friday for the live. If you're going to be available, we're going to be doing between a rock and a hard place, and it's dealing with Vice President Harris and
Woo.
this growing trend of men, specifically black men, who are outwardly against her
What?
or have said that they will not vote for her. And I'm just trying to figure out why. I,
Why
I,
would
I,
they vote?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why
Black men.
black men, what's going on, bro? H-Town Loki in these TikTok streets. I just read a lot more of Project 2025, and I got a guest up. If you want to be a guest, send me a DM for the next time we go live and read this. I'd like to have a panel of both opposing and agreeing
Oh yeah.
thoughts on this. Um, but yeah, there's a growing trend of black males who say that they'd never vote for. They'd rather vote for Trump. And so
Just because she's
we're
a
gonna
woman?
well,
I
so
would love to. I would love to dig
one of
into
my
that.
cousins, yeah, we're gonna explore that, try to get a
Okay.
little bit deeper as to
Yeah.
understand why this is a thing among men and among black men. and see what it might expose, and how we look at it as a country.
Mm.
Right? We're supposed to be, the leaders of the free world, but we've never had a woman in office.
No. Yeah, I know Trump's going at her saying she's not black. He said in like some black committee. I gotta
Oh my
research
goodness!
what that committee was.
It
But
was a national. It was a national journal, Black Journal session,
that's what it was.
and
So
he
she's
was
not
getting
black.
his ass toe up.
But from what I remember, her dad's Jamaican, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, they black. She's AKA that's black, and she went to HBCU. That's definitely black. And I know it was part of her campaign trail. So politicians act kind of to get outside themselves in. But
Yeah.
I mean, last I remember, Taraji FaceTimed her behind on the BET Awards show, and Kamala said she outside.
She
That's
outside.
black.
Hey, so I don't want to give too much away
All
for
right,
Friday.
but yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, that's what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be on it.
Oh,
One of my
man.
cousins and I were talking about it last night, and I absolutely love
Yeah.
her view on it.
hmm
So we're gonna touch on it and talk about it and figure it out.
Yeah, can I be bloodline adjacent? I know we're not related. Is bloodline adjacent allowed? Y'all allow Flo in there. Hell, he's not
Hey,
bloodline.
so and I think I told you this, man. Once you've been on, you family.
Okay,
You know,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
it's a family bloodline for a reason. It's a community, it's a network. This is something that we're promoting and what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
Uh, Again, you can't achieve greatness by yourself. And even
facts.
when you achieve greatness, you have to make sure you're bringing someone else with you. Like Shannon Sharp was saying, once he achieved his level of play, he was looking for somebody else to be there with him.
Facts.
I don't want to experience that. I don't want to be alone at the top. I don't want to be
Mhm.
alone at the bottom. Right. So it's an effort to bring us as a community along and explore different uncomfortable movements. Right. So as a family. That's what it is. So no, you ain't got to be a bloodline adjacent.
Okay.
You ain't gotta be bloodline adjacent. We can hop on and it looks like we're gonna do this segment. We're gonna follow some other stuff, other topics, and again, not everybody wants to talk about or hear about politics or listen about
Mm.
Project 2025 or Agenda 47.
Mm.
Uh, and the people who do, they might not want to talk about a rock and a hard place, right? So just trying to create these spaces for everybody to have something that they can engage in. That's the point of it all. So yeah, come back Friday, and then again we'll get offline together, and we'll make a schedule if you want.
Yeah, I'm down for it.
All right, bro. I appreciate you. Hey, thanks for hopping on. Thank you for everybody listening, and continue to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all your social media outlets. Hop on Spotify, hop on Apple Podcasts because we're there as well. We're a global podcast and we're doing it for families. So if you have any topics you want to talk about, any questions, comments, concerns, or you want to be a part of the actual panel, just send us an email to the email on the scroll bar, fblpodcast@gmail.com, and we will continue to push forward. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you decided to hang out with us tonight, and we thank you for it. We appreciate you. So, with that being said, God bless and good night.